Mr Deputy President, the Libertarian Party opposes the bill. I want to say at the outset that in the rich tapestry of life and in every culture, a number of people do find themselves with an urge to identify with a gender that is contrary to the gender that God or Mother Nature gave them at birth. Indeed, there are very ancient that note this phenomenon 3,500 years ago. In a civilised society, these individuals live their life as they choose and be treated with dignity. But we are talking about a very small minority where this urge appears naturally. I fear this bill encourages a social contagion and causes harm for adults, and they have the freedom to make these decisions for good or bad. My primary concern is around encouraging troubled children to mention that very few would have done so without the social contagion. This bill allows and encourages legally sent self-identify as the opposite birth. This is tragic, given everything we have learned from the Cass Review, a report developed by the world-renowned and highly respected Dr. Hilary Cass. This exhaustive, years-long study under the auspices of the UK government evaluated international gender clinics and 21 treatment guidelines around the world. As a result, the UK, Mr Deputy President, is reversing this trend. The Australian states are heading in the opposite direction, but we will reverse that at some point. The Cass Review revealed that the vast majority of children and adolescents presenting with gender dysphoria are often troubled and present with a constellation of other comorbidities. Around 60% are autistic. Most present with depression and experienced childhood trauma, where they have been sexually or physically abused. Some cut themselves, many have eating disorders. This isn't John Ruddick speculation. Redoubtable Dr. Hilary Cass, after many years of high-quality research, sponsored by the British Department of Health, and fully endorsed. Nobody's attacking the Cass Review in Britain and in Europe. Some activists claim all these issues are because of their gender confusion, but the Cass Review revealed this is simply not the case. The Cass Review revealed we must treat the myriad issues and address feelings of gender confusion as part of a holistic cycle. But what this bill does, making it easier to change sex legally, it reinforces a child's initial gender confusion, and with the now passed Conversion Practices Bill 2024. In debating this bill, it has been said critical interventions are in a child's best interest, they should not be held back by ideology, end quote. It is now clear that, in fact, what is driving too many children towards these life-changing decisions is ideology, trans ideology, which takes the form of what is known as gender-affirming care, whereby clinicians must effectively reinforce that supposed new gender. Troubled teens and gender-affirming care rolls out the red carpet. The Cass Review revealed the complete and utter failure of gender-affirming care. I encourage all members to read the Cass Review, at least a summary of it. This is a travesty because we know a 2021 paper by Toronto University that, if left alone, 87.8% of gender-confused kids outgrow their childhood onset dysphoria. It's almost 9 in 10, Mr Acting President. This is under the desistance model of care, or the wait and watch approach. Other studies, like that of the renowned Canadian psychologist Kenneth Zucker in the 1980s, found that 90% of gender-confused kids, when left alone, turn healthy gay adults. The tragic irony is that the trans movement is re-establishing a discarded social norm whereby, for example, a feminine boy is told they've been born in the wrong body and must fit into societal heteronormative stereotypical norms. I thought we'd progress past this, Mr Deputy President. Those who say the prospect of experiencing a puberty that does not align with one's gender can be highly distressing. Well-respected child psychologist Dr Gillian Staff, specialist at Queensland's Children's Hospital, states that puberty is the cure. Dr Spencer says, quote, "It is now known from their widespread use that puberty blockers prevent dysphoria. So instead of up to 90% of children becoming comfortable in their body, as many as 95% of those on puberty blockers proceed to cross-sex hormones," end quote. The ever-growing transitioners like Chloe Cole are telling us that they're often then fast-tracked onto a medical pathway into experimental surgery where their bodies are altered in a very significant way. Many will be rendered sterile and have to live with atrophied and removed genitals, the loss of sexual function, a permanently changed voice, brittle bones, risk of osteoporosis, cancers, and this goes on, including reduced life expectancy. Given that we know that the brain is typically not fully developed until the age of 25, I want to put it to this chamber, Mr Deputy President, that children cannot possibly fathom the implications of potential sterility and not being able to have children. Therefore, it must be said that these procedures take place without a child's full understanding of the repercussions and therefore their full consent. In debate, it has been said that denying timely access to gender-affirming treatment presents enormous risks to welfare, but my view is that this bill itself presents enormous risk to health and welfare to gender-confused kids. This bill encourages a somewhat gender-confused teen to go down the path of medical transition. Many thankfully do not, but too many will. I now turn to the issue of surrogacy. In libertarian theory, the concept of surrogacy sounds fine. A couple unable to naturally conceive a child willingly part with their money, and a willing surrogate is happy to be paid to carry the child. That payment could be a life-changing sum for the surrogate in a poor country, and I'm sure that is the case in many cases. But that's the theory. I am, however, concerned when this theory hits reality. What if the child is born into a third world country with imperfect health? At that point, the couple expecting a healthy child and renege on the transaction. What do we then do? The birth mother didn't want the child, and the poor little child will be neglected or worse. We also know that child trafficking is a big, evil industry, and those criminal interests will exploit legal loopholes and put children in horrendous circumstances. I'm also concerned that some couples will on a whim decide to use a surrogate to have a child. I fear that in some cases it's a case of impulse shopping and not for reasons of genuine love and care of children. I would prefer a situation where we had far less abortions in this country and far more adoptions. Adopted children were quite common when I was growing up, and adopted children were almost always welcomed into a loving and caring family. Adoption barely happens today in New South Wales. I now turn to the outing penalties in this bill that include penalties and restrictions for threatening to out a person by disclosing their gender history. Who would fall foul of these provisions? Journalists reporting on the biological sex of a male-born sex offender who now identifies as a woman who's being housed in a women's prison. This bill could make that a crime. What about a woman whose partner or ex-partner begins to identify as a woman and she understandably wants to talk to her family and friends about her situation? This bill could make that a crime. What about female sporting codes? Why shouldn't the other female players have the right to know that they will be playing alongside or playing against a biological male? Mr Speaker, this bill has an authoritarian tone in parts. We're entering a dystopian world where historical documents are being altered in the name of an ideology. Are members of this chamber comfortable with forging historical truths? Libertarians stand with Aristotle and Ayn Rand. Reality exists. Birth certificates are an important historical document, and to alter them is to embark on a downward spiral where we think laws can change reality. I now turn to the very real issue of biological men and women's sports. Currently, women do have some legal recourse under the grounds of discrimination, but by legally changing sex, this bill and associated regulatory provisions under the Anti-Discrimination Act will trump all. We've seen some sporting bodies recognise the safety of girls and some not, like the Women's Soccer Premier League team here in Sydney, which has a team consisting of half transgender players who went through the season undefeated. 6 of their wins came as the result of forfeits, including a semi-final fixtures. This is madness and cruel to women and girls who simply love playing soccer. The proposed bill will worsen the already severe impact on fairness and safety for women and girls by allowing males who self-identify as females to participate in women's sports, leaving women without legal recourse to challenge this unfair situation. Women are already withdrawing from competitions and are reportedly even being injured by these larger, stronger and more aggressive individuals who were born male. The outcome of the changes to the Birth, Deaths and Marriages Registration Act will be that males identifying as females will be further empowered and legally protected to join women's sports team and competitions, unfairly taking positions and awards that rightfully belong to women and girls. Additionally, these amendments will further weaken the few remaining legal protections available to female athletes brave enough to advocate for female-only competitions. If this bill passes into law, I encourage rebel sporting associations to break away and to set their own common-sense rules that protect the physical safety of girls and women. I turn now to the issue of biological men in women's spaces. I have been provided with documents, and I think all members have been, that have been sent to members, including the Attorney-General and senior members of Cabinet. These documents highlight reported incidents involving individuals born as men but who now self-identify as women, encroaching on women's single-sex spaces and services. This list is not exhaustive. It represents only a snapshot of incidences occurring across Australia in the past 5 years. Many incidences are unfortunately unreported by the media. The data has been collated to counter the false claim that the issue of men in women's spaces is negligible and poses no harm or risk to women and children. A further document we have been provided with is entitled Australian Criminal Cases, Crimes Committed by Men Who Identify as Women. And here's what they found. Of the 40 cases documented, in 100% of cases, the offender was born male but now identifies as a female. In 60% of cases, the offender claimed to be a woman after committing an offence. In 70% of cases, the offence is of a sexual and/or violent crime committed against women and/or children. 89% of these offenders who committed a sexual and/or violent crime against women and/or children are referred to as she, her by the court. In 75% of cases, the offender suffers from a known mental health disorder or drug dependency. In 65% of cases, the offender or the court takes into account the difficulties of being transgender, resulting in a more favourable outcome for the offender. We are creating perverse incentives, Mr Deputy President. It is entirely reasonable to expect that if this bill passes into law, we will see an increase in heterosexual men entering women's spaces under the guise of being a trans woman. This is certainly the trajectory that has occurred in other countries that introduced self-identification laws ahead of Australia. Rather than passing this bill, this Parliament should be making law that protects a business owner like Sal Grover, who created a female-only app and who has been dragged through endless litigation because she refused membership to a trans activist. Libertarians believe in freedom of association, and Sal Grover should be free to have an app and welcome or reject whoever she wants. This bill, however, will seriously erode social and legal barriers, effectively deregulating by introducing self-identification. Ignoring or minimising the harm or dismissing it as a culture war is a gross negligence of duty. The potential harm to women and girls is real. I would prefer that proposed laws like this would be referred to the people of New South Wales to vote on it via a plebiscite. Were that the case, we all know what the outcome would be. This is social engineering imposed from on high, so win, lose or draw today, this is just the start. I want to thank the thousands of people who have written to me expressing their alarm. I want to especially thank the many fine activists I've met with in my office. There are too many to name, but I did want to mention the LGB Alliance, lifelong gay and lesbian activists who are alarmed by trans ideology. These are brave people whose voices we should hear more from. I oppose the bill. I will be moving some amendments that, if agreed to, will bring some rationality to this bill. Thank you.
Ms Abigail Boyd.